Imagine a world where global leaders come together to address the most pressing issues of our time. But beneath the surface, tensions simmer and disagreements threaten to derail the entire process. This is the reality of the United Nations General Assembly, where over 140 world leaders will gather in New York City to discuss the future of our planet. But here's the thing. Despite the lofty goals, the UN is facing an internal crisis that could undermine its very existence. As the organization celebrates its 80th anniversary, questions about its relevancy and efficiency are being raised by both supporters and critics alike. Recent cuts to foreign assistance by the US and the reevaluation of humanitarian contributions by other countries have forced a reckoning for the world body. So, what can we expect from this year's gathering? Let's dive in and explore the top issues that will dominate the conversation. Firstly, the Two-State Solution Conference chaired by France and Saudi Arabia will be a major focal point. The conference aims to garner support for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it's already been boycotted by the US and Israel. The US and Israel argue that the international push for a Palestinian state rewards Hamas and makes it harder to reach a deal to halt the war and return the remaining hostages. But proponents of the effort, including top UN officials, remain unpersuaded that recognition of Palestine is crucial at this stage of the conflict. And this is the part most people miss. The meeting and expanded recognition of Palestinian statehood will likely have little, if any, actual impact on the ground, where Israel is waging another major offensive in the Gaza Strip and expanding settlements in the occupied West Bank. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has threatened to take even further unilateral action in response, which could escalate the situation even further. But here's where it gets controversial. Some argue that the two-state solution is no longer viable and that a new approach is needed to address the conflict. Others argue that the international community has a responsibility to recognize Palestine as a sovereign state, regardless of the potential consequences. As the world's leaders gather to discuss the issue, one thing is clear. The status quo is unsustainable, and a new path forward must be found. Secondly, climate change will be a major topic of discussion, with over 110 world leaders speaking at a special UN climate summit on Wednesday. The summit aims to get nations to strengthen their plans to reduce carbon emissions and transition to cleaner energy sources. But despite the urgency of the issue, many countries are still lagging behind in their commitments. The US, in particular, has been criticized for its withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and its rollback of environmental regulations. But other countries, such as China and the European Union, are expected to announce new plans or rough sketches of their plans this week, which could help to drive progress on the issue. And this is the part that will spark debate. Some argue that the UN's approach to climate change is too focused on rhetoric and not enough on action. Others argue that the UN is the only platform where global leaders can come together to address the issue, and that its efforts are crucial to driving progress. As the world's leaders gather to discuss climate change, one thing is clear. The window for action is rapidly closing, and bold leadership is needed to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. Thirdly, President Donald Trump will be returning to the UN for the first time since beginning his second term in January, and his speech will be among the most anticipated. Trump will likely face questions about his administration's cuts to foreign assistance and its withdrawal from international agreements, including the Paris Agreement. But here's the thing. Trump's speech will also be an opportunity for him to outline his vision for America's role in the world and to address the growing tensions between the U.S. and other global powers. And this is the part that will spark controversy. Some argue that Trump's America First agenda is a threat to global stability and cooperation, while others argue that it is a necessary correction to a system that has been unfair to the U.S. As the world's leaders gather to listen to Trump's speech, one thing is clear. The U.S. is at a crossroads, and the path it chooses will have far-reaching consequences for the world. Fourthly, the presidents of Syria and Iran will be speaking at the UN, and their speeches will be closely watched. Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa will be representing his country for the first time since the ousting of former President Bashar Assad, and his speech will be seen as a key test of his ability to restore ties with the international community. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian will be speaking at a moment of great magnitude for his country, as a 30-day window to stop the reimposition of sanctions on Tehran is closing. The clock started when France, Germany, and French, and the UK declared Iran wasn't complying with its 2015 nuclear deal with world powers. But here's the thing. The situation with Iran is complex and multifaceted, and there are no easy solutions. Some argue that the U.S. and its allies should take a tougher stance on Iran, while others argue that diplomacy and negotiation are the only way to resolve the issue. As the world's leaders gather to discuss the issue, one thing is clear. The stakes are high, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. Finally, some of the most important diplomacy will happen behind the scenes, during embassy receptions and private dinners and drinks, at some of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants and clubs. The high-level week is jam-packed with official and unofficial gatherings between heads of state and government, where complex trade deals, sensitive peace negotiations, and even normalization efforts between allies and adversaries alike could see breakthroughs. But here's the thing. These behind-the-scenes meetings are often secretive and difficult to track, which can make it hard to understand what's really going on. Some argue that this secrecy is necessary to allow leaders to negotiate and compromise without fear of public backlash, while others argue that it undermines transparency and accountability. As the world's leaders gather to discuss the future of our planet, one thing is clear. The next few days will be crucial in shaping the course of global events. So, what do you think? Should the UN prioritize the two-state solution, or is it time for a new approach? Should the U.S. take a tougher stance on Iran, or is diplomacy the only way forward? Let us know in the comments.